Yeah, so as we discussed yesterday, we have seen the different types of nodes, the what is Anycast gateway. So today we'll be just having a walkthrough of a DNA center, how it looks like, what are the different options. We'll see how to design different sites in SDA, how to discover devices and add it to the fabric, so that everyone gets a quick overview how it looks like, and if anyone is already working on DNA center, it will be helpful for them as well. So starting after the login, the first process in DNA center or in SD access is to discover devices. So as we saw yesterday, first what you have to do is you need to create the underlay, right? So after underlay is built, based on that underlay, we discover it on in DNA Center. After discovering, we add it to a specific site, or you can say a specific location or a specific building to be more specific. So add it to site, and if we have a relevant like more granular control, we will have a building. After that, we provision the device. So in provisioning, it is as good as adding it to fabric and then assigning the role. But again, if you see there are multiple steps involved in this process, so we will just see how we discover devices, how we create different sites, and how we add the devices to that specific sites. So we will start with the device discovery. This is just the dcloud demo available for everyone, as I shared the URL and the credentials last time, so you guys can try it yourself as well. So just go into the discovery option. Now the thing is, this is a kind of already pre-built lab, and we will be having our own lab very soon. So till then, we this is helpful just for getting an overview, and when we have our own lab, it will be more personalized so that we get to know how to build the underlay, what is the configuration of the underlay. So we'll be having a look at that time in more detail. So let's quickly see what all devices are discovered. So if you see, 97 devices are already discovered on the basis of their IP address. Now, let me tell you, in SD access, it is recommended to discover any device using their loopback IP, which is also the RLock. We saw yesterday how the control plane has the RLock to EID mapping in its database. So this RLock is nothing but the loopback IP of that switch, because loopback is always on, and even if the interface fails, still we have the IP. So even if there are two interfaces or kind of HA thing, even if one interface goes down, still we don't need to bother because we are connected on the loopback. So the device is discovered in DNA center using loopback. That's the reason it is recommended. So what we will do, we will just use the existing some of the IP for those devices which are discovered. We will just use this IP and create a new discovery. Devices which are discovered can be rediscovered again. That's not a problem. We'll just name it as test discovery. Now there are two options to discover: CDP, a single IP address, or a range of IP address for multiple devices, or you can use the LLDP. But recommended again is IP address, because in case this is specific if you have the manual underlay configured, because you have a different set of subnets configured as per your organization. Some organizations may use the 10 dot subnet, some of them might use the 172 dot subnet, so it depends. So in IP address range, since we have only one device, the from and to IP will be same. And see, the preferred management IP address is there are two options: either none, it will be discovered on the IP address which you provide, or use loopback means that the IP address we have provided, it specifies that we are using a loopback IP. Also note that in the credentials set, we need to specify the SSH credentials. Here in this case, it is Cisco. The device is already configured. We don't have CL access to that, else I would have shown you that as well. The SNMP read write credentials version 2C and SNMP v3 is also supported. HTTPS is also supported but not used here. And netconf, as we discussed, is also supported. If you check in the advanced section, you can specify which order either to use telnet or SSH, but SSH is secure, so SSH is recommended. So just go and click on discover. Again, you have two options, now or later. If you want to schedule it for some other time, you can do it as later and specify the time. But for us, it will be now. So just start it. And now since this device is already discovered, you just got to see it as discovered. But in regular scenarios, what it does is it tries to check the device. Let me make this. Yep. It tries to check this device on the basis of its whether it is up or not, its ICMP status, SNMP, CLA, and netconf if enabled. So if you can see that except netconf, since it is not enabled on that device, rest every parameter it is reachable from the DNA center. And whatever discoveries we do, it will be visible in this left pane. This one, we did it now, the test discovery. Now when the discovery is complete, you can just go to the provision tab, and in the devices section, in the global inventory, you'll be able to see those devices. Now you can see there are, here's the count, there are 98 devices currently. Now they all have been assigned. Sorry.
Pranav, can you show from where you got that discovery option from the main page?
Yeah.
Like the
So
position was on
in the DNA center, when you log in, just scroll down below this network configuration. There are tools option, and we have the first option of discovery. If you go on that, here it is, view all discoveries, and this was the discovery which we did.
Pranav, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Pranav, that loopback IP you mentioned, right? Preferred is use loopback, right?
Yes.
So basically, will it only search the loopback interfaces, or will it search all the interfaces in that case now?
It will always search for the IP address which we specify.
No, I mean, see, now you are specifying one IP address, right? Single slash 32 IP address. My question is, if you're specifying, imagine a pool of addresses, like it might be 10, 50, 41, 54, 124 to 172, for example. I'm just giving you a long subnet. So in that case, you'll mention preferred addresses, loopback address. What does it mean? Will it only report if the IP address is assigned on the loopback, or will it assign anything else? That's what my question is.
So the thing is, whatever we mention here will be checked. Now DNA center is not concerned whether you are using the loopback address or management address for discovery. It is our choice. But when we specify the use loopback IP address, it will treat that as the rlog IP. Now there are scenarios where we want to keep the management plane separate and the discovery plane separate. So like you might be aware of the out of band management device management IP, right? Like where we specify a separate management IP just for managing it from outbound network, and the internal IPs, that the IPs of the interfaces are completely different. So mostly we use that management subnet for managing the devices. But in this case, it is recommended to use the loopback IP, and the loopback IP will obviously be from a internal subnet of the devices.
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is, how is that useful now? Preferred mechanism is loopback. How, if I don't give that loopback, if I give something else, how will it change? Anything?
Nothing will change. Nothing will change. It will be as it is. Just the thing is, your device has to be reachable to the DNA center from that management IP address. And when you are doing the configuration, you have to specify that loopback IP address as the rlog IP address. Now you have to get into the CLI manual configuration for that. But if you specify the use loopback here itself, the same IP will be taken as the rlog IP. You don't need to configure anything manually later on.
So imagine if this IP address was assigned to my GI 0 bar 1 interface, okay? And I mentioned here the prefer IP address mechanism is loopback address. So will it go ahead and change that IP address
No,
to the loopback interface?
no. See, unless and until we don't provision the device, nothing is changed by DNA Center. No configuration is pushed. Remember this. Until provision, it doesn't change anything on the device. But in the provision stage, it like has those scripts which it pushes to the device configuration, and what configuration is pushed, we'll have a look on that now.
Okay, so
So
I
even
mean,
if even if you specify G1/0 as the as the IP address of G1/0, and here you are specifying it as loopback address. But what if in case that specific interface goes down, your reachability to the DNA center would be broken. It would not be reachable to the DNA center for managing. But if you have a loopback address and you have some crossover, or you can say a fallback path already configured for that device, so what it will do, DNA center has the loopback IP to be reachable. So no matter whatever path it takes, the loopback IP is always reachable because it is an always on interface.
yeah. So okay, I think I'm still a little confused. So there are multiple IP addresses, right? Now a switch will have a loopback address, a switch will have a gig interface address, whatever, 2 or 3 different addresses. So
Right.
I'm giving an IP address which is basically not a part of loopback address here, but I'm checking the option where it says loopback address. So tomorrow, if my GA 1/0 interface goes down, so the DNA center will still be able to reach the device via the loopback. Is that what you're saying?
I am
Will that
saying when you have a loopback IP, then only you have to specify it as we are using a loopback IP. Why would you do using a GI0 interface and specifying it as preferred loopback IP? Why would you do
no,
this?
correct, but it is sometimes out of practice we don't do it on loopback and we're specifying the wrong interface and we're discovering it on a different interface here, then becomes a problem, right? So is it the best practice to still make sure, go ahead and check, make sure that all your IP addresses are assigned on the loopback only?
Yes, it is a best practice and it is the recommended way. That's the reason that specific option is also available in this DNA center, whether it's just management IP or use a loopback.
Okay,
It's not concerned about which interface you are using.
okay.
So now when we discover a device, you can see in the provisioned global, there is also a specific drop down in global as unassigned devices. Now, since every device here is assigned some or the other role, we'll be able to see it here. The next thing we have to do is, now I'll just do it again and show it to you. Let's take a 8 switch. Yep, this is a 8 switch. So if you see, you can see the different sets of categories or the different options. It has already discovered that it's a 9300 switch. The exact platform, it's a 24 port switch. The CL number is visible. Last updated, it checks with the device every 25 minutes. You can change that interval as well. You can see the uptime of the device. The last sync status is managed. This managed means it is available in the DNA center as well as it is provisioned by the DNA center. So that's when this sync status will be in managed. The image version, that is the software iOS image, is whatever is specified. The reachability is available to with the DNA center. The specific site, now here it's San Jose SJC01 building. So this is the specific site and building to which this device is assigned. The device family is switches and hubs. Now, this device is also capable of having a WLC feature, which is known as embedded WLC. So that's the reason it is showing as WLC capable. This is the IP address using which we discovered the device, and this is the device name. So the first step would be, in ideal situation, would be to select this device, go into provision and assign device to a site. When you do this, since it is already assigned, it's not allowing me to do it again. But before doing this, you need to have the sites ready. So the first step would be design section, network hierarchy. In global, you need to specify the specific continent, the specific country, the specific state. Now, this is just a way of segregating the devices. It doesn't mean that you have to create in a similar fashion. For you, it can be directly the city name and then the building, or directly the building, but it makes difficult for you to manage it if when you are adding new buildings or new infrastructure is getting added. So if we keep it in an organized manner right from the start, it becomes easy for managing later on. Because when the device count, the site count increases in a later stage, you don't need to change the settings then at that specific moment. So let's take an example of US San Jose. We have a specific building for that, and in that building, they have created a separate floor. Now, this is the heat map already uploaded for the wireless thing. The APs are already mapped on the specific locations. So what we have to do is, after creating this specific site, now how to add a site. I'll show you how to add a site. Go to this thing, or if the internet access is enabled for the DNA center, you'll be able to see a geographic map over here. You can directly click on add site. So the first thing would be to add an area. Now for me, I'll add it as Bangalore. Or let's do it this way. Let me check if India is already part of this. No. So what we will do, we'll go under Asia and click on this small gear icon and click on add area. So here I'll specify it as India and I'll add. See, a site is added. Now to add a specific city, I have to just click here and add area within India. So it will be Bangalore. You can see a drop down menu is visible. Now in Bangalore, I want to create a specific building. My office is just one building, so I'll create it as one building. Now we'll search for yeah. Now if you see, it can even we can even specify the latitude and longitude for mapping it, or we can just specify address and it searches for that specific address. I don't know why this is not happening. We need to give a specific. Can anyone tell me the IP address of networker's home so we can quickly add it as a building?
I pasted in chat.
Yep. Thank you, Saurabh. We have just click it on add, and the pinpoint is assigned to that specific location. When we go into that specific location, you have the liberty to add a specific floor, say floor 2. You can this type is for the radio frequency of the wireless access point, so that when you upload the floor map of that specific floor, it already considers the walls, the cubes, or it is just an office with the high ceiling, whatever the type is. You'll consider it as indoor high ceiling. You have option to upload a floor plan here. Will not go into that. Just add. Are you sure you want to proceed without image? Okay. And yes, we have a specific floor. Now the next thing would be to configure the basic network settings. That is, what would be the DNS IP for that specific region or site or building. What would be the SNMP server? What would be the AAA server? Is it a ICE integrated with DNA Center, or it is just a triple non-ICE AAA server? So you have to go into the network settings and click on the network option. Now remember, if you do it for global, it will be automatically inherited by all the childs, that is Africa, Asia, Europe, whatever lies. But if you want to give these settings as a site specific or a building specific address, what you have to do is, instead of having this blue mark on the global, just navigate to that specific site. Now for me, I just have Bangalore as my location. I'm sorry, I think my spelling for Bangalore is wrong. Anyways, can ignore it. So now there is an option. What you can do is, based on our scenario, we have Bangalore. Now it would be a case that you have two different sites in Bangalore. One is site 1 and one is site 2. And you want the settings, that is the AAA server, and that obviously the AAA server would be the same, but the SNMP server or the DNS server to be the same for entire Bangalore location. So in that case, what you have to do is, you have to go in this Bangalore area and then create a configuration here or mention the IPs here. But if in case you have a separate infrastructure for site 1, a separate set of servers for site 1 and separate set of servers for site 2. What you have to do is go to that specific site and do the configuration. Now obviously you won't have there would be a very like rare chances of having a situation where you have a dedicated DNS server for your floor 1, floor 2, floor 3. That wouldn't be the case. It will be the same for the entire building. So what you have to do is we have to keep this thing in mind, because if we do everything on global, the same will be inherited to each and every child which we have configured. So for me, I want to be specific for this specific building. So what you have to do is go into this building and make sure the pointer is on this building. And if you see on this 3 dots, it will say that it has inherited from global. You can go ahead and change it anyways. That's not a problem. But this orange 3 lines means it has inherited the settings from globe. Now, what all can you add in this network section? Now, the options to add is the first and important thing is the AAA server. Whether you are using it for just network or for client and endpoint. This means that even for this client and endpoint thing means you are using it for the .1x as well, the .1x authentication. And this network means you are just adding it to DNA Center, which will be added to the ICE as well by the DNA Center, and then you'll be using the SGT part or the TrustSec part. So you can see, since it's a Cisco device, you can specify ICE or just a AAA. Now, just a AAA means it's a non-ICE device. Earlier, the option was non-ICE. Now they have changed it to AAA, and the protocol for it will be Radius, because TechX is used for device administration. Same for client and endpoint. A DHCP server, if you have a DHCP server for the endpoints for getting a specific pool of IP address, so you can specify a DHCP server, DNS server, a syslog server, SNMP, NTP, if you want to specify any message for the day. Now you can see the various options going into add servers. Now AAA is already added, NTP is already added. There is option of NetFlow collector. NetFlow collector is the same as Cisco Stealth Watch, wherein you can collect the NetFlow traffic and then see if there is any suspicious activity. So this is all about the network settings. In the device credentials, you can see the device credentials which were used for the discovery. Now, there might be a case where I am using specific credentials for the Bangalore devices. When I'm configuring it in Underlay, I have a specific different username and password for Bangalore devices, a different username password for Mumbai devices. So go into that specific site and just specify the credentials. Now, let me show you how to add different IP address pools when you want to assign it in the overlay, or if you are using the LAN automation or the PNP feature, how you can reserve a IP pool. Now, an important thing is any IP address pool you use for any set of devices, you have to first create it in global and then reserve it for a specific site or area or a building into that specific location. So here, if you see, in first I'll navigate to global, and the IP address pools are created already. The infrastructure pool, the IPv6 pool, the corporate pool, border pool, to just click on add the IP pool name or test, whatever the subnet is. Now when we do this, there are two set of things. One, IP address pool if you are using PNP, and one IP pool for the endpoints. Now we have to make sure whatever pools we are adding it here, the same pools are available on DHCP. Now there is an integration option available of DNA Center with Infoblox DHCP services. But for that option to try it out, we need to have an Infoblox IPAM DHCP DNS server which has the services and integrate it with DNA Center, so that whatever pools we do it here, it is automatically, the configuration is pushed to the Infoblox server as well. We don't need to configure the DHCP settings separately. But in our case, since we don't have a Infoblox server now, there are again rare chances if you want to proceed with purchasing an Infoblox server and then integrated, that's well and good. You can use this DHCP services, but a lot of cases it's a Microsoft DHCP server or any other DHCP server you have already in place. You just need to create pools on that and make sure that you are adding the pools and reserving those specific pools in DNA Center. Now let's go with an example that I'll be
Oh,
having.
what is Infoblox again? Is that another DNA side package, or is it?
It's
What's
a
the
it,
IPAM?
it's a IP address manager, DHCP, and DNS solution. If you Google what is Infoblox Ddi, you'll be able to get to know that it's DHCP, DNS, and IPAM. It's basically a IP address manager, a DHCP and DNS solution, which comes as a dedicated hardware device. Let me show you quickly. So if you see, this is Infoblox DDI, a DNS, DHCP, and IPAM solution, which can be integrated with DNA Center for a better management of IP address management. And again, there are like hardware devices or a cloud-based solution. This cloud-based solutions, I guess they have recently launched it. So you can explore this solution by yourself by just going to the Infoblox site. Now the global pool,
Yeah,
obviously it
thank
will
you.
be, yeah, you're welcome. The IP subnet will be a big subnet because we want to assign chunks of that specific global pool as our private IP address space, which will be assigned to our endpoints. So for us, we can keep it an entire /8 pool, give the gateway and DHCP server and DNS servers for this, and just save it. Later on, what you can do is just go into that specific building where you want to reserve, click on this reserve option. Now you have to specify the IP address pool name. Now I want this specific pool for endpoints. So my type will be LAN. If you are reserving a pool for the PNP or the automation feature, you can select the management. This matters nothing. It is just for the sake of remembering or keeping it specific. Now IPv4, it has already checked in. You can use this option as well, but since for now it will be only v4. And when you go into this global pool, you can see there are multiple global pools which we checked here are visible in this drop down. Now they have created the pools, different pools for assigning IP address to the access points, the management IP addresses. They have created the underlay pools. This was the pool which I was talking about. If you are using the PNP automation feature, you can use this underlay pool for so that when the devices get up, DNA Center will assign a specific IP address from that specific pool of that specific area and building wherever
Yeah,
you have assigned it.
so the underlay pool is for the IP management IP addresses, right? For all the switches. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
And so the loopback, the only thing that the person has to do is to configure loopback on all the switches, and then that's how they get discovered at DNA, correct?
Exactly. But when you go with the automation option of PNP, they already configure the PNP. They already configure the loopback address. It is just in case when you are doing the manual thing, you have to specify a loopback IP address specifically or explicitly.
Okay, and I think Pranav, you probably explained the PNP yesterday that I missed, but how does the PNP work? Is it based on the serial numbers of the switches, or how
Yeah,
does it?
it's the same as it is for the SD-WAN. The same thing, the same PNP works for SD access. We'll discuss it in a later stage how this
Okay,
PNP works and what all are the prerequisites required for setting up a PNP, what access is required. We'll deal with that later on.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Pranav,
Yes.
once the lab will be available to us, we'll do it from the scratch, right from provisioning to discovery and
The voice is
state
quite
also.
disturbing. I'm not able to understand. Can you a bit
Okay,
audible?
I'm saying that once the lab will be available, so we will do it from scratch, right from provisioning
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
discovery.
So
Because
yes,
I'm getting a bit confused with these
I
IDP
understand. I
and the
understand.
pool.
The reason for this overview is you at least now know what these four options are, or even if you don't know the four options, you at least know now from where to start, from where we'll be starting. So when we actually do it in our own lab, you'll be more comfortable doing it then. Because if we directly did that lab which we will be having our own lab, then it would be kind of a very new thing for you. You'll be like searching for the options, but now you at least have an option to explore the different set of options, at least from where to start. So later on you can take the pace ahead.
Right. So over here, the global pool, right? IPv4 global pool. This is, you can select the pool that you created, right? In the global pool. Is that what you're
Yep.
saying?
Yes, you are specifying the pool, the global pool which you created, and from that you have to specify a specific subnet from that. So if you see the prefix length or the IP subnet, you can specify directly here. So it'll just take now for example, let me tell you, the
So
global
if we
pool is
created, yeah, okay.
10.0.0.0/8, right? Now I want a very specific pool just for my one floor endpoints. So what I'll do, I want to reserve a specific pool of 10.10.10/24, which will just have 254 IP addresses. So what you have to do is select this specific pool. Now, since they have already created /24, while you are creating, you can create a /8 or /16. Now, if you see this corporate pool, I'll select it for time being. And the prefix length, I want to further bifurcate it into only a /24 pool. So I'll just do it /24. And within this, I want a 10.10.10. 0 subnet, so that till 255 I will have the IP addresses for my use, whatever I want to use it with. Now I know that most of them would be wondering why are we doing this, where this will be used. But yes, whatever we are doing it in this design section, everything will be used some or the other place. It will be in the provision part, but I'll not go into much deep today because this will be again like more bombarding on you with different set of options. The GUI is completely new, then which all option I selected, where I got into, it will be difficult for you to remember. So I'll just keep it very simple so that you just know how to discover the devices and what are the settings or the options which are available for configuring in the design section. We'll just deal with the design section today. Now here you specify the gateway. Now I have this specific pool with a gateway of .1. I have this specific DNS server, a DHCP server, and this specific DNS server. Now, how we got this into this drop-down menu? Because it's already created in global. Simple. Click on reserve. Now you can see that it already conflicts, so it's not allowing me to reserve because some other location has also like reserved a specific pool which conflicts with that pool. That's why it's not allowing me to reserve, but this is how it works. So these are the options which I just demonstrated. These are like the foundations, like the DHCP server. If any endpoint connects, it needs an IP address. You need to have a DHCP server for that. You need to have a DNS server for resolving its host name.
Pranav, I have a question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, whenever we create a subnet, right, the DHCP pool, we define it on the DHCP server. But here we have created a subnet and we are defining a pool here itself. But we are also telling that there is a DHCP server from where the client should get an IP from. So how does that map out?
So a good question. So the thing is, when we specify a DHCP server, this DHCP server we are specifying so that in provision we don't need to manually configure this DHCP server or a DHCP helper IP on every, what you can say, on every switch or every roll of the fabric or every device in the fabric. So while provision, this DHCP IP address will be pushed to all the switches, and this IP pools, we are not creating it here, we are just specifying it so that these specific pools will be fetched from the DHCP or checked with the DHCP, and the IP addresses will be assigned. When we check during the actual endpoint onboarding in the later stage, in the last stage probably, we will see with what are the different types of issues faced with this DHCP IP pool options. I have also faced it when doing in some of my projects. So I'll also share what my experience was dealing with the DHCP server. If the pool is not created on the actual DHCP server, see, because why we are creating these IP pools, DNA Center is not designed to act as a DHCP server, right? It is a network controller from where we want to automate and push the configuration to all the devices. It doesn't have the functionality to act as an DHCP server itself.
So, Pranav, that means the pool that we will be defining the DNAC has to be same that we are defining on the DHCP server.
Yeah,
It should exist.
that's right. That's the reason I already said whatever you create here has to be present on the DHCP server as well. Now, if you
Perfect.
have a Infoblox integration with DNA Center, you don't need to do that because dcloud and DNS Center and Infoblox Ddi works in similar fashion as DNA Center and ICE works in SD access. So if you create a SGT on DNA Center, the same is seen on ICE, or the same is created on
DNAC,
ICE.
so DNAC get in sync with the info blocks, and we don't need to define anything over here. It will pull
Exactly.
all the
You
information
create
from
you
info
create the
blocks.
pools on Infoblox, it will be automatically seen on DNA Center. You create it on DNA Center, it will be automatically seen on Infoblox.
So I guess just following up with the original question, I guess the real advantage of defining these IP pools for the clients on DNA is just to get to use DNA as one place to see the full visibility, right? Because
Yes.
I mean,
You don't want to go specifically to the DHCP server and then check what was the IP pool I've assigned. To keep it everything in a single place, we are just doing the same or reserving the same IP pools as we did it in the DHCP server.
got it. And so I guess once this is all set up and the network is up and running, would the DNA assurance side let us know if the IP pool is getting filled up and stuff, since we have defined it in DNA?
It's visible right here as well. So if you see this IP pools, and if you see in this global, you can see the 100% IPs are available.
Got
So
it.
if the IP addresses are getting used, it will be seen here. 60% IP addresses are available, 50% are available. But since there is no endpoint connected, it's like 100% available.
Understood. So this is how the DNA connects to the DHCP server to get this real-time monitoring stats, right? Like IPs
Right,
available and stuff. Okay.
right. You connect an endpoint, a DHCP server assigns an IP address, you'll see one IP deducted from here that it's already assigned.
Got it. Thank you.
Excuse me. Now another a big like an important option for the network administrators, or the the administrators who work daily on checking the iOS versions, if uh, any iOS version is end of life or we need to upgrade it to a specific dedicated version to keep it as the N-1 standard. There is an option for image repository. Now you can see, you gone are the days where you have to plug in your laptop with a TFTP server or push the image from a FTP server. What you have to do is simply mark the image as golden or fetch the image directly from Cisco in this image repository and just click on update devices. Excuse me. So if you see, this family of devices is already fetched based on the devices which are discovered, and the number of devices can also be seen in this specific option. If you click on this hyperlink, all the devices with this specific family, that is 9300 catalyst, is already into this, and the version which they have is 16.12.2T. Now, why we have to do this? Because you want to keep again the same thing, a single place where you can just log in and update the devices or downgrade the devices if you want. You can mark an image as golden to specify that any device with a version lower than that mentioned golden image has to be upgraded. When you can upgrade it, whether you can do it manually now itself or you want to schedule it for some other time that is off business hours. So the first and foremost thing, import. You can either use the image URL from Cisco's website or you can upload a file. It depends. And using this update devices option, you can see it has again taken me to the provision tab automatically. I didn't do anything. I just clicked on update devices. It took me directly to the provision option. So here, when you select a device, and in this software images, Now the focus is software images. It is showing that we are dealing with the software images. So when you select this device and go into actions, there is a option for software image. Now either it is image update status or update image. Now you can see for this specific device, that is building 1 floor 2 access switch, the image version is 16.10.1e, and the software image is showing it as it needs an update. So what you can do is, when you mark a specific image as golden in the design section, you get this option. If the iOS version doesn't match with the golden image version, just click on need update. Now it has already done the checks. Just give me 1 minute. Let me check why this is. So if I click on update image, you can see that first thing is to distribute the image. This distribute is simply copy the image on that device. So let's do it right away. Note that the current version is 16.10.1e, and for the need update, the golden image is 16.12.02, which means the image which the device will be upgraded to is the highlighted one, 16.12.2, and the current image is 16.10.01. So select the device, action, software image, update. I want to distribute it now. When I do it now, all that chart, the scheduling will be gone. Click on next. Now I want it is showing that when the distribution is done, do the activation right after that. Now if you have already distributed the image, then you will have this option enabled. Now this option is not enabled. You can see it's not allowing me to select now because the distribution thing is not yet happened. And just click on next. Confirm the distribution is scheduled for now. Activation will be done after the distribution is completed. Just click on confirm. You can see, and there was a pop-up image update initiated. Now when you go into this see details, let's see details. I have to go into this image update status. You can see that it's in progress. The image is being distributed.
This is just an image, right? So this is just an iOS XE image. There are
Right.
other pieces to an upgrade, right? Like we have ROM-on upgrade, we have FPGA upgrades. How is that taken care with this?
For iOS XE, I don't think so. We need to specifically upgrade. It was like on the older versions, we needed to do the upgrade explicitly. But I think now with this iOS XE itself, everything comes within this iOS XE itself. I'm not sure of the current situation.
No, it doesn't come. You have to upgrade the ROM-on separately. You have to upgrade that. So that's what I mean.
Okay.
It's not a bundle thing. So is there a separate?
Okay, I'll check on that part.
Okay. Yeah.
The distribution is still in progress. So meantime, let's check some other options. Now, let me tell you this design section, whatever we have specified here, that we want a specific DHCP server, a specific DNS IP to be pushed. This you can do. This is directly you can do it without the SD access or the advantage thing. Now when you are using DNA Center just for assurance and automation, and to you don't want to go through the hassle of doing this configuration manually on 500 or 1000 devices, you can use this DNA Center for automation. But when you want to do the SD access thing, what is SD access? All the roles assigning, the endpoint provisioning or the endpoint onboarding, integration with ICE, and then the .1x authentication, all that part comes under SD access. So for that you need an advantage license. But if you have an essential license and you just want to do the automation part, that is the image upgrade, which we just had a look on, or pushing the network settings on the specific devices, keeping it organized in the DNA Center so that you can manage it for the assurance purpose. So that thing is also possible. There are many customers who use DNA Center first for the automation and assurance piece, and then later on, if they are satisfied with this service, they go on to the SD access by purchasing the advantage licenses, and then migrating this entire traditional network into a SD access network.
Yeah, Soprano, can you just? I was typing the notes while you were talking. So, essential license covers switch provisioning, image upgrades, correct?
Correct.
So that's the first level. The second level is advantage. You said.
Yes, second is the advantage, where you get all the SD access features like assigning it the role of edge node, the endpoint onboarding, that everything, all those configuration will be done centrally from the DNA Center, and it will be pushed in a template kind of thing from the DNA Center to the switches. It'll just, the format will be the underlying thing will be template for DNA Center, but it will be altogether an entire configuration required for the endpoints to authenticate and then complete the control plane and the data plane.
So yes, the endpoint integration means like with ICE and stuff, right? Correct. So
Yes, yes,
that's part of the advantage module, right? So
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay, and the last one is the assurance module. That's basically the whole monitoring solution, right?
yeah. That's the entire monitoring solution where you can monitor the health. It's more than the Solar Winds or Cisco Prime, because you can monitor a lot more things in assurance as compared to the Prime or whatever monitoring solution you have in your infrastructure. There are a lot of bunch of features in assurance, and very specific, speaking very specific to the wireless part, there are more features in assurance considering the wireless part, because wireless has become an integral part. There are like very few of the organizations who still depend only on the wired part. Rest, most of them depend on the wireless part. We have laptops, smartphones, smart devices who depend on wireless to connect. So the assurance piece has more features focused on the wireless part.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. And so it's just basically only three tiers, right? And is that how the current licensing model is? Essential, advantage, and assurance. Those are the three models that Cisco sells for DNA, SD access.
uh, for uh, for the SD access, I know for this essential and advantage. For the traditional one, I'm not in touch with the traditional network anymore, so I it would be difficult for me to answer with the traditional perspective.
Yeah, I think traditionally they still do the Cisco One licensing still. So,
Oh, the
but
Cisco One platform.
yeah, yeah. So in the essentials, right, Pranav, can you still can you the stuff that you discussed today, right? The in the GUI, creating the pools,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. Can you use Postman REST APIs to program it along with the essential package, or do you need Advantage Assurance for the DNAC?
For platform thing, I am not sure what type of license you need. I have to check on that licensing part. Just let me take a note of that. Give me 1 second.
Because over here you say DNA Center REST API has been enabled. You see that on the right on your screen on the bundle update. Yeah, right there. Right there. You know how to change the screen. It's right there.
This one?
Scroll down. Scroll down. Right there. You see that?
Oh,
You
yeah,
hit-
yeah. This one.
Yeah, you go up one. Yeah,
This
right
one.
there. Yeah,
The
DNA
DNA
Center.
Center REST API has been enabled. Yep.
So is that part of the essentials package or?
I've noted it down already.
Okay.
I'll check and let you know that what type of license you require for integrating with the API, the REST API, DNA Center with REST API.
Okay, thank you.
So what is that feature? REST DNA Center REST API has been enabled. What will
So
that do?
probably you can create your own programmable calls to configure DNA Center, and it's a completely
Okay.
new way of configuration using REST
Because
APIs.
right, so you'll push a script to the DNA Center and it'll do the clicks there.
Not it'll not do the clicks. The configuration is done via a programmed call, you can say. I think Glenn can throw more light on this API thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so basically, every single button that Prana was clicking, to create the IP pools and then assign it to a certain floor or building,
Right.
you can do that using API. So basically, for each clickable button has an API call to it. So you can
Yeah.
use
Exactly.
Postman, and so DNA will have a dictionary saying, okay, for this clickable button in your GUI, here's the API call to access that button, right? So you just copy that
Exactly.
command and then you assign the variables to it. Then you can push it from, either Python or Postman, right?
Ansible, or there are
And
many languages.
yeah. So when you push it, then it's like, let's say you have 5 clicks, you can do that in 1 second with like 2 commands, right? So if you're building like multiple IP pools or assigning multiple switches per building or all that stuff, it's just like creating a CLI command list in Notepad and pushing it to the switch. That's pretty much what it comes down to. So
Yeah. I mean, I think we use something netconf yang in our old traditional. Also, we kind of use that Python scripts to use to program it. Correct. I think that's what you're talking about, right? Netconf yang.
yeah, that's southbound APIs, right? So this is northbound where you're hitting DNAC. So I just wanted to make sure, like, I understood, like, if it's possible with the basic licensing. So, but Pranav will get back to us on that.
Right. And Pranav, on the provision part, right? Can you just click on the provision for me once?
Yep.
So on this provision, so basically, here is the place where you do. So imagine you have already discovered the devices, right? You have already discovered that this particular site, for example, Bangalore Networkers Home has 50 devices, right? So once you've discovered that that site have Networkers Home have 50 devices, what is this provision going to do here? It's going to.
So it is going to push the settings which we created in the network settings in the design section. So all the settings will be pushed from the DNA Center when we provision the device. So when I select this device and click on provision and provision device, all these settings will be, so you can see all these settings. You can see a summary of what all will be pushed to the device, and this you don't have to do it. Everything will be done by DNA Center. Just click on deploy.
Oh, okay. Okay, so in the previous tabs, you're just mentioning what it is doing, but this is the stage where it is deploying the configs to it, right?
Yes. So I'll tell you, when we have the CLI access of that device and we keep it side by side open, it will be more understandable and more easy to grasp rather than just provisioning it now. So when
Yes,
you
makes
have that,
sense.
so when you have that CLI, we can just click on the show and we can compare the old configuration with the new one, and you can see what all are the additions. So we will be doing it when we have our own library. Yep. So now let's see some system settings which we can configure. Now, if you see, there is only one DNA center host available, which needs to be like the count should be 3. And you can see in the high availability section, it is specifying that enabling a high availability requires minimum of 3 DNA centers. And this is in the system management, only automation and assurance is running. They don't now, or when we were discussing about the IPAM, this is the place where you'll be seeing the Infoblox server, and this is the place where you'll be seeing the Cisco ICE when we integrate it with DNA Center. Now this is already showing it as available since it is integrated, but this is a private IP, and we are not able to access ICE in this specific lab. This is just for having a walkthrough and not doing any configuration part. So now we will see some more settings, which are like the admin specific settings, you can call it. And for those who are already enrolled in the SD-WAN classes, you can see the vManage. You can integrate it from this vManage properties page, where we specify the vManage IP address and also the IP address of the vBond, the credentials and the port number on which it will be able to talk with each other, and the certificate for vManage, so that it authenticates it with the DNA Center authenticates the vManage based on its certificate as well. Let's start with account lockout policy. In this account lockout policy, it's the same as for every device. You have to specify the maximum login retries, the lockout period, that after the specific time it will be locked out, and the login retries after what time you want to flush the entries and reset it to default. This is the option. Like I want the maximum retries only 3. If lockout effective period would be 30 minutes, and it will be reset after 10 minutes. So, and this is the place where you integrate, or you probably add your Cisco ICE. In the coming session on next Sunday, we will be dealing with the ICE integration part, the macro and micro segmentation, what is a policy plane and the control plane and data plane. So next session would be more inclined towards the ICE section, since the micro segmentation is done using Cisco ICE, that is based on the Cisco TrustSec.
Again, that would be a walkthrough session like this, or how would basically?
It would be more of a theoretical session, because there are many new concepts when it comes to ICE integration, DNA Center with ICE, macro segmentation, the micro segmentation. We will also see, like, for example, if a specific TrustSec policy is already configured and enforced, how the traffic flow will be if there are two different users from a different micro segment. So it'll be more of the theory and the scenario based things which we did in the last session. But this time it will be more interesting, because we have two Cisco products, DNA Center and ICE, and the way they work together in integration with each other, it's really amazing.
Okay,
Now this
Pranav,
is the place. Yeah, go ahead.
can you discuss little bit more about why will you integrate vManage with the DNA Center, and what is the like what features will you get if you do that? So I did not clearly understand that. What Why will you integrate it?
Uh, frankly speaking, I have also not worked on a scenario where vManage was integrated with DNA Center, but I can provide you with the links that why you do it and how you do it. So
Okay.
just to answer it in one line, the reason will be that when you have your a specific site and you want the configuration of that vEdge router to be pushed from the vManage, and you want the DNA Center also to be aware of that specific thing, this integration is more helpful when we will be discussing the transit part in SD access. That for example, if you have site 1, if you have site 2, and you have a SDA fabric, and you want to use that fabric as a transit for site 1 and site 2, this is where this scenario comes of integrating vManage with DNA Center. Let's go and check if the device which we had distributed the image is upgraded or not. I can see it is not yet upgraded. Image distribution has been successful. Let's go and try it again. It is showing it as up to date, but I think this is probably because of some kind of scripts on this specific cloud demo. It's not either allowing me to upgrade the device, or it is upgrading but not showing it here. Might be the reason. This is basically more of a scripted scenarios in this dcloud lab, so it becomes even difficult for me as well to understand some of the things, because when you have a lab which is pre-built or not pre-built, which is available for us from the scratch, we can try and test out the entire settings in that in our own way. For this, I have to depend on the configuration which is already created, and if something doesn't work out, I can't troubleshoot because I don't have access to the required tools and devices, so it becomes a problem.
So when you upgrade, right, and it becomes a problem, so will you be able to see where it failed and
Yeah,
how do you?
it actually shows if the distribution was not successful, why it was not successful, and it shows if the activation was not successful. Probably an example can be the image could not be activated because the iOS version and the hardware platform mismatch. The image version was not intended for this specific image, or this specific hardware. So it shows that, but I am not able to show you that right now because of these limitations.
But
But
then
when
would
we
it
do,
roll back? Would it roll back to that earlier image then?
yes, we have an option to either roll back, and if in case you think that the device is stuck somewhere, you can even access the device via CLI and then proceed as per the traditional way. Now we will be also discussing what, like, if in such scenarios where the configuration is not getting pushed due to some reasons or due to some incompatibility, then in such cases, how you can take the CLI access and then proceed directly with the traditional method rather than pushing it directly from DNA Center. That happens mostly in very worst scenarios because the platform is already detected in DNA Center, and the image which we mark it as golden, it checks it with Cisco's software image database. before marking or validating it, and it already has a set of pre-checks configured, without which it won't proceed forward for upgrading the image. So if there is anything wrong, it notifies. So to be more specific, if you go into this specific, select this device, go into action software image, and when you use this option, check image upgrade readiness, you get to see. Now let me show some other device if you can see the image upgrade readiness. Okay, so this is showing this is already upgraded. Image repository, update devices. This thing needs an update. So I'll select this actions. So let's see what's there in the CSV file, the image upgrade readiness tool. So you see it has downloaded for the entire thing. Let us check for so if you take a successful device, you can see the device name, the device type it belongs to, the target image, which was 16.12 in our case, but for now it has downloaded a report for the older version, and for the 3K switches, target version was this. The image type was system software, reboot is required, check type was flash check, and in description they have mentioned it as flash check is success, and the pre-check status is also succeeded, and the last check time is 24th of August. It is like quite old, 2018. But yes, this is how you can download the upgrade readiness report, and when you perform it, it actually updates that specific report, and then you can download the new updated copy as well. And the role assigning, like, just since we have time, let me just show you the role assigning part which we discussed yesterday. So yeah, now for example, this is a age switch. So when you want to add it as an age node, the option which we checked in the slides was of version 1.2, which was older. Now since this is version 1.3, and if you go into this specific about option, you can see the exact version of DNA Center. For this it is 133 and a minor release of 1. So when you assign it to the age as the age node, and we saw yesterday that for wireless controller we also have option of embedded wireless. If that device supports the functionality, the wireless functionality can be enabled on this, but it is better to assign edge node when with a border node rather than the edge node. So when you do a edge node and click on add, you see a blue border is reflecting with a small e. When you save it, at least one control plane to the fabric domain. See, the control plane node is the node which has to be present first before proceeding with assigning the role of edge nodes, because having endpoints or the edge node would mean nothing if you don't have the host tracking database, if you don't have the border nodes for the traffic coming in and going out, it would mean nothing. So if you see at this specific thing, this device is already assigned a role of control plane node, border node, as well as the embedded wireless, or EWLC. It is known as EWLC, embedded wireless controller. The same functionality of wireless is present in this specific core devices. It's a 9500 catalyst switch, and these are the edge devices. If you see, they are assigned the role of edge nodes.
Where do you get it? So provision devices and the fabric. How do you get there? All of these.
Yes. So go into provision, into the fabric. We have San Jose fabric, and then there are multiple buildings, and under that you have multiple floors. So when you go onto this specific floor, this specific building, SFO 15, and this floor, you can see this. Oh, I think it's in the building itself. Yep.
Okay.
So Pranav, the embedded wireless right now, you are deploying it as an image in the core switch. Is that correct, or the core router?
The iOS XC image, which supports the embedded wireless, it's already, if it is already present in this specific device, you get this option of you get this option anyways, but you don't need to push any specific image, because in the iOS XE there is already a wireless package available. By assigning this role, this provisioning feature or DNA Center activates that embedded wireless feature and turns this device into a EWLC as well.
Okay, so all the APs will form a tunnel to that core, right? Is that correct?
Yes, this one. Yep, exactly. So these APs will form a tunnel with this, rather than having a WLC outside the fabric.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that again? What was that again, Pranav? Can you repeat that? What you said?
Yeah. So as we know, the access points form a cap web tunnel, same as in the traditional method for the control plane thing. And for the data plane, it will form a VXLAN tunnel here with the connected edge node. Since this device is assigned the functionality of wireless controller as well, the tunnel will be this way. And not because we have the embedded wireless inside the fabric and not a dedicated 9800 wireless controller sitting outside the fabric.
Right. So basically, you will have a 9500 as your wireless controller as well. So basically, it can give you the data of all the access points in that connected to it,
Exactly.
and is
Yes,
that what it is?
yes, the same device. It acts as a control plane node, a border node, as well as a wireless controller. So it will also be responsible for the wireless controller things, which we do it traditionally, like having what all access points are registered with it, what all clients are associated with a specific access point. Say you have like 3 endpoints connected to this specific access point, then what are those endpoints? So all the wireless functionality, it will be enabled on this device. It's a kind of a more advanced part enable using this embedded wireless. And it was recently, not recently, it was released after some later versions of the initial release of DNA Center. Because earlier, when it was not possible of having a wireless controller inside the fabric, many of the customers like started complaining on that part, and this is when Cisco came up with this EWLC feature, which you can enable directly on the border or the control plane node. And Like you don't need a separate device for that again.
Right, but if you do not have that feature, you can go ahead and provision a 9800 wireless controller inside this fabric, or no?
No, that for when you are using a dedicated wireless controller, you cannot connect it anywhere inside the fabric. It has to be outside the fabric borders.
So basically, it has to go in through that border node and then basically come out.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, okay.
In wireless, we will be also discussing in such scenarios, what if you have your existing wireless access point? Now consider you don't have a Cisco, you have a Aruba wireless setup. You have your controller in place in the data center, you have your access points. So still you can use it. You'll not be able to use the fabric functionality, that is obvious, but how to deploy the over the top solutions, the different approaches we'll be discussing in the wireless section. I think everyone would have access to this specific DNA center. Can just check it once. The credentials are the same, and there is also a DaveNet DNA Center sandbox, but the thing over there is I could not see any device in the network devices. It was all zero, so I could not see any device in that. That's the reason I didn't choose that specific. Even if it shows it here, I'm not able to see it in the provision section. That's the reason I chose this specific dcloud thing. Earlier, there was a dedicated lab for SD access in the earlier versions of 1.1 and 1.2 of DNA Center, but later on, I guess they removed it or made it specific only to Cisco employees or the tier 4 access who have access to the tier 4 of Cisco ID. They made it something like that, and even I don't have access to that SD access lab by Cisco. It was present earlier. Any questions?
I mean, I can access that. I can access the link. So how do I get to this discovery page? What you are seeing, right? I have access to that link, and how do I go there?
Just open that specific link, and when you open it, first I think it will ask you for your Cisco ID from
Correct.
dcloud. When you click on view, it will open it on the new tab, and it'll give you a login page. Are you getting this login page?
Not really. Can I share my screen for a quick minute, if that's okay?
Yeah, please go ahead.
You're able to see my screen, right?
Yep.
So this is where I get to once I click that link, right?
Okay, just do one thing. Go to the dcloud.
Okay.
Yeah. Now go into catalog. Try searching for DNA in the search catalog. Yeah, in the search bar. Yep. Just go down. Filter it. Scroll up and filter it with only instant demo in the left pane of content categories. Left. Yep.
Okay.
Just instant demo. Yep. Scroll down. There it is. The Cisco DNA Center Automation and Assurance version 1.3.3.
This one?
Yeah, that. Yeah. If you check, there is a view link below that. Yep.
Click on this.
Yep. Yep. Now we get the page.
Oh, okay. So this is the same page where we were on now?
Yes.
And what are the credentials you said you can use here?
Yeah, it's demo and demo 1 2 3 4 exclamation. I'll put it on chat again.
I think I got the wrong credentials.
If you download that document, you'll see those credentials. There is an option for additional documents where you can see that. Anyways, I've posted it in chat.
Okay, yeah, I think this is fine.
Yep.
Okay, so this is where we are right now, correct?
Right. So if you scroll down in the tools section, you'll be able to see the discovery. Yeah, the first option. Yes.
Okay, got it. So do you, okay, fine. That's all right. Okay, thanks, Pranav.
Yep, you're welcome. I think this is it for today's walkthrough. I won't stretch more for today. That's the reason I kept it for just 1.5 hour.